Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are not just analyzing a major figure in art history. We are diving headfirst into the manifesto of the machine age.
That's a great way to put it.
Our sources chart the incredibly rapid and ultimately explosive career of Umberto Boccioni, the artist who made speed, light, and motion the defining characteristics of early 20th century modernism.
And Boccioni's life and work really represent a fundamental rupture. I mean, he wasn't simply an artist who happened to be a futurist.
No, he was the engine.
He was the primary theoretician. He provided the intellectual and, the visual architecture for the entire movement, despite his career lasting only a few intensely productive years before his tragic death.
At age 33, which is just staggering.
33, in 1916. But his vision of dynamism, this idea of deconstructing solid mass and celebrating continuous movement, it just fundamentally shifted how artists approached the canvas and the sculpture stand.
So if you, the listener, want to understand that moment modern art decided to abandon, say, the gentle landscapes and polite studio portraits of the 19th century,
All right.
and instead celebrate the factory, the roaring automobile, and the chaotic modern city, then Boccioni is your essential guide.
He really is.
Our mission today is to track that evolution from his early roots in, traditional Italian painting and Divisionism through his intellectual breakthrough spurred by Cubism to his ultimate achievement.
Which was wrestling with that huge concept of how to synthesize every fleeting moment of time and space into a single cohesive work of art.
That concept, synthetic continuity, I think that's the key we need to hold on to here.
It is the key because it forces the viewer away from the passive snapshot and demands they engage with the cumulative, total sensory experience of modern life. It's like the visual equivalent of a sonic boom.
A sonic boom. I like that.
Capturing sound, light, movement, and form all simultaneously vibrating on the canvas.
Yeah.
It's what transforms his work from just being interesting paintings into true revolutionary statements.
Okay, let's unpack this. So when we start looking at Boccioni's biography, it's almost uncanny how the defining theme of his art movement is immediately reflected in his own childhood.
It really is. He was born in 1882 in Reggio Calabria, way down at the toe of Italy. But his father was a minor government employee.
Which meant what? A lot of moving around.
A lot of moving around. This constant relocation is more than just a biographical footnote. You could argue it's the psychological foundation for his later artistic fixation on dynamism.
So it sort of preconditioned him?
In a way, yes. The family moved north, so he grew up traversing Italy, living in Forlì, Genoa, Padua. He finally settled in Catania, Sicily, at the relatively late age of 15.
And if you live a childhood where your roots are always being pulled up, where you're always seeing a new industrial horizon.
Exactly. New cities flashing past the train window, it creates a mindset that is perpetually obsessed with transience and speed. He was never truly rooted in any one place, which, kind of reflects the transient experience of modernity itself.
That's a compelling idea. His biography literally conditioned him to prioritize motion over stasis. So once he did settle, he began his formal artistic training in Rome.
Right, at the Scuola Libera del Nudo of the Accademia di Belle Arti di Roma.
And his training was shrewdly balanced from what I've read. It wasn't just classical stuff.
No, not at all. While he received classical instruction, he also sought out highly contemporary influences. He studied under Giovanni Mattoloni, who was a master of the Liberty style, that's Italy's version of Art Nouveau, and he was particularly famous for his commercial posters.
So he's getting exposure to graphic design commercial appeal.
Yes, and that was invaluable. It instilled in him an early understanding of how to communicate complex ideas with immediate graphic punch, a skill he would later deploy, ruthlessly in the Futurist manifestos.
And the sources really emphasize a critical intellectual turning point happening in Rome around 1901 when he met Gino Severini.
Absolutely. This was less about formal technique and more about radicalizing his entire worldview.
What were they into? What were they reading?
Oh, they were deep divers. Severini's autobiography confirms this was a period of intense intellectual ferment. They were sharing interests in challenging philosophical movements, Nietzschean thought, socialist ideas, a general spirit of rebellion against the status quo.
So he's already developing that critical voice.
He is. Boccioni's writing from this time already possessed that signature mix of outrage and irony. He was building the intellectual rigor necessary to lead a revolutionary movement. For him, it wasn't just about painting better pictures.
It was about tearing down the old ones.
It was about destroying the cultural heritage that Italy was so proud of.
And the technical foundation for this revolution came from an unexpected mentor, Giacomo Balla.
Yes, Boccioni and Severini became Balla's students around 1901, and this is where Divisionism enters the picture.
Which you could say was the necessary step before Futurism could happen.
It was the intellectual prerequisite, for
Hmm.
sure. Balla focused on systematic scientific painting. Instead of mixing colors on the palette, the Divisionist applies pure color directly to the canvas in small divided strokes, dots, or stripes.
So the mixing happens optically in the viewer's eye.
Precisely. It was a direct progression from Impressionism, but with a scientific rigor aimed at maximizing luminosity and representing the interaction of light.
Okay, so Divisionism taught him how to analyze and deconstruct light and color systematically. It essentially trained his mind to see the world not as monolithic forms, but as vibrating, discrete elements that could be reassembled.
You've hit it, exactly. Severini acknowledged this later, calling their encounter with Balla a great stroke of luck, whose direction was decisive of all our careers. The rigorous process of deconstructing light prepares you to then take the far more radical step of deconstructing form and space.
Which is exactly what Futurism required. But before this intellectual groundwork fully matured into Futurism, Boccioni spent time systematically absorbing what was happening in the broader European avant-garde.
He did. He spent a significant period in Paris in 1906, specifically to study Impressionist and Post-Impressionist techniques.
Right.
He was charting his own path by just immersing himself in it.
But the sources also highlight an even more unique experience later that same year, a 3-month visit to Russia.
Yeah, and this wasn't an artistic pilgrimage. This was a front-row seat to genuine political and social turmoil. He saw civil unrest and severe governmental crackdowns firsthand.
So he's seeing real, modern conflict.
Real, raw, modern political conflict. And when you combine that with his theoretical interest in socialism and Nietzschean rebellion, it gave him a comprehensive worldview of the necessity of violent, total cultural change.
Which is the very core of the Futurist creed.
Exactly.
And here's the paradox that makes Boccioni such a fascinating figure.
Yeah.
While he was building this profile as a revolutionary artist, traveling, absorbing these intense ideas, he was also working steadily as a successful commercial artist.
Right. It shatters that myth of the struggling, starving artist, doesn't it?
It really does. Between 1904 and 1909, he was producing professional lithographs and gouache paintings for high-profile international publishers, including the renowned Berlin-based Stiefbold & Co.
He was commercially viable. He was intimate with the demands of European illustration, citing influential commercial figures like Cecil Alden and Harry Elliott. This commercial grounding, this ability to design, to communicate clearly, to command attention, is crucial to understanding the effectiveness of Futurism.
How so?
Because when he produced the manifestos, they weren't just intellectual screeds. They were graphic, punchy, and instantly recognizable visual assaults designed to shock and recruit. He knew how to sell an idea.
That makes a lot of sense. So his early works, from 1902 to 1910, they really show this tension between his rigorous training and his burgeoning modern vision.
They do. He was painting traditional subjects, landscapes, and portraits, but the Divisionist technique was being pushed to its limits, and modernity was creeping in. You start to see trains, factories, industrial elements subtly intruding on the pastoral.
Are there any specific works that mark this transition period right before the Futurist explosion?
Two works in particular are excellent markers. First, The Morning from 1909. Critics at the time immediately noted its bold and youthful violence of hues.
Violence of hues. I love that.
It's a great phrase, isn't it? It's an exercise in pushing luminosity to the absolute extreme, using the Divisionist method to create an almost overwhelming sense of light and energy.
Wow.
It's preparing us for the full-blown chaos of his Futurist works.
And the second piece.
The second is the highly personal piece, Three Women, created between 1909 and 1910. It portrays his mother, Cecilia Forlani, his sister, and his lover, Eins.
And this work is important because
Because it confirms his mastery emotion and the figurative tradition he was about to declare obsolete. It's cited for expressing powerful feelings, melancholy, strength, love. It's a complex, sensitive portrayal.
So the fact that he was fully capable of such deep humanistic art makes his later radical declaration of war against tradition so much more potent.
Precisely. He rejected the past not because he couldn't master it, but because he found it completely insufficient for expressing the modern world.
And his mother, Cecilia,
Yeah.
she was a constant figure in his work, right?
She was. She appears in at least 45 works throughout his career. A constant, stable figure against this backdrop of his artistic revolution.
So the stage is set when Boccioni relocates to Milan in 1907. Milan wasn't Florence, right? Wasn't steeped in Renaissance memory.
No, it was the industrial engine of Italy. It was a place of speed, noise, and machinery. This move was a necessary transition from the academic rigor of Rome to the kinetic reality of modern industrial life.
And that's where he finds the final piece of the puzzle.
That's where he finds the catalyst. He connected with local artists, meeting the Divisionist Gaetano Priviati in 1908. But the real spark, the true catalyst, occurred in early 1910 when he met Filippo Tommaso Marinetti.
Marinetti, who had, of course, already stunned the world by publishing his foundational manifesto del Futurismo in the French newspaper Le Figaro the previous year.
Marinetti had provided the grand, bombastic ideology, the praise for speed and the automobile, the condemnation of museums, libraries, and academies.
But Boccioni took that grand rhetoric and gave it a technical vocabulary for the visual arts.
That is Boccioni's enduring contribution. On February 11, 1910, he, along with Balla, Carrà, Rousselot, and Severini, signed the Manifesto dei Pittori Futuristi, the Manifesto of Futurist Painters.
So while Marinetti was the prophet,
Boccioni was the chief architect. He became the movement's main theorist, responsible for translating revolutionary philosophy into a usable aesthetic program. He publicly read the manifesto in Turin on March 8, 1910, cementing his role as the voice of futurist painting.
however, the sources make it clear that the 1910 manifesto, while revolutionary in intent, was still visually rooted too deeply in that scientific divisionism we discussed.
That's true. Futurism hadn't yet achieved its distinctive visual language of fractured forms and continuous movement.
So what was the turning point? What was the intellectual breakthrough?
It came around late 1911. The real shape of the movement, the distinctive look we recognize today, only materialized after Boccioni, Carrà, and Russolo traveled to Paris and experienced the revolutionary works of Cubism firsthand.
So seeing the structural decomposition in the paintings of Braque and Picasso, that was the key.
That was the key to unlocking the futurist visual solution.
Let's spend some time here because this is a great paradox. Futurism was all about this extreme sense of Italian national identity, a fervent rejection of the past, and a celebration of modern speed.
Right.
Yet the technique that made it successful came directly from the French Cubists. How do we reconcile that?
Well, Boccioni resolved it by taking Cubism and fundamentally changing its purpose. Cubism taught him how to decompose form, how to structurally analyze an object and present multiple viewpoints simultaneously in a fractured plane.
But Cubism was, intellectual, static.
Exactly, at least initially.
Boccioni injected time, emotion, and kinetic energy into that structure. He didn't use the fractured plane to analyze a guitar on a table. He used it to analyze a horse running through a city.
He codified this crucial difference in his essential theoretical text, published in 1914, Pittura e Scultura Futuriste, Dynamismo Plastico. This book is basically the blueprint. It is the blueprint. It defines the core philosophy of plastic dynamism by contrasting it with its immediate predecessor, Impressionism. Boccioni pointed out that the Impressionists paint a picture to give you one particular moment, a single snapshot of light at 4:30 p.m., for instance.
Right. Traditional art subordinates the life of the picture to its resemblance to a static point in time.
Yes. But the futurist demands the opposite.
Thank you.
The futurist must synthesize every moment. This means synthesizing time, place, form, and color tone into one dynamic whole. You are not seeing the snapshot. You are seeing the entire duration of the event. The memory, the anticipation, the movement, the environmental interaction, all superimposed.
That is a staggering intellectual leap. It's not just a technical style. It's a conceptual revolution in how we understand time and perception in art. It turns a painting into a continuous field of force.
Absolutely. So instead of a frozen image of a horse running, you see the movement, the visual distortion caused by its speed, the air it displaces, and the ground it covers, all simultaneously layered onto the canvas. It's a visual attempt to capture the fourth dimension.
It makes the invisible forces sound, speed, energy visible.
Yes. And once Boccioni established this revolutionary framework for painting, he quickly realized that a two-dimensional surface was, it was insufficient to truly embody the concept of dynamism in space.
Hence the necessary transition to sculpture.
Precisely. His pivotal second visit to Paris in 1912 was specifically for this purpose. He toured the studios of the avant-garde, seeing the works of Cubist sculptors like Georges Braque, Alexander Archipenko, Raymond Duchamp-Villon,
And Constant Tamagaro, as well as the earlier sculptor Medardo Rosso.
right, who specialized in fusing form with light. Boccioni was determined to apply plastic dynamism to the third dimension. And this intellectual commitment directly led to the publication of his own sculptural manifesto shortly thereafter.
Proving that for him, the conceptual framework always came first.
Always.
So let's look at the works themselves, starting with the colossal canvas that marked his break from the past and launched his career as a futurist painter. The City Rises.
Completed in 1910, this painting is just monumental. It measures 2 meters by 3 meters. It's a massive visual fever dream.
And Boccioni himself was very clear about what he was trying to do.
Oh, remarkably clear. He wrote to a friend that he attempted a great synthesis of labor, light, and movement. It depicts the chaos of construction, charging horses, struggling human figures, all interwoven with this vibrating, powerful light.
And it was an immediate sensation. It wasn't just critically admired, it really signaled the arrival of the movement.
It did. When it was exhibited in Milan in May 1911, it received waves of positive reviews for its sheer audacity and energy.
Oh.
It was so impactful that by 1912, it was the headline piece for the traveling futurist exhibition that toured Europe.
And critically, it achieved commercial success almost immediately.
Yes, selling that year to the renowned Italian classical pianist Ferruccio Busoni for a hefty 4,000 lire.
Now that sale to Busoni is fascinating. Busoni was a titan of classical music, steeped in tradition. For a figure like that to purchase this radical, industrial, anti-traditional painting,
It shows just how much of a cultural shockwave Futurism was creating. It was forcing established figures to engage with the modern vision.
and The City Rises now resides at MoMA, which is a clear marker of its historical importance.
Following this success, Boccioni plunged fully into the aesthetic of raw sensation, shedding the last vestiges of Divisionism. This leads us to La Risata, or The Laugh, from 1911.
And this is considered his first truly uncompromising futurist work, right? Focused entirely on the sensory assault of modern urban life.
That's right. In this case, the noise and chaos emanating from a cafe. It's a riot of fractured angular forms representing the noise and drunken energy. But the reaction
was not good.
it was swift and violent. Compared to the more transitional City Rises, The Laugh was met with public hostility.
And there's that incredible telling anecdote about the exhibition. The piece was physically defaced by a visitor who, apparently overcome by outrage or confusion.
Ran their fingers right through the fresh, wet paint.
That kind of visceral rejection tells you exactly how radical Boccioni's visual language was. He wasn't creating passive art. He was creating art that provoked a physical, aggressive response.
Absolutely. Later, critics viewed it as his direct, frenetic response to the intellectual challenge posed by Cubism, but infused with emotional content. Today, The Laugh sits alongside The City Rises at MoMA.
And we should also note the companion piece from the same period, The Street Enters the House.
Yes, from 1911, which captures the feeling of the chaotic exterior urban environment literally spilling into the private space of a woman leaning over a balcony.
Boccioni truly demonstrated his mastery of the new technique with his famed trilogy, Stati d'animo, or States of Mind, completed in 1911. This wasn't just a series of images. It was an attempt to paint an emotional narrative.
This trilogy, The Farewells, Those Who Go and Those Who Stay, is perhaps the most complete realization of his theory of synthetic continuity in painting.
The subject is the railroad station.
The absolute symbol of industrial speed and departure, and the associated emotional landscape. He didn't just paint 3 separate pictures of a station, he painted 3 different states of consciousness derived from the act of travel.
Okay, so let's break down the trilogy. The Farewells focuses on the kinetic noise and emotion of separation.
Right. In The Farewells, Boccioni uses the fragmented lines and planes to express the noise of the locomotive, the emotional static of embraces, the actual numbers and signs of the train rushing past. The forms are dense, complex, overwhelmingly loud. It's a total sensory overload.
The physical and emotional turbulence of saying goodbye amidst the industrial din.
Exactly. Then you move to Those Who Go.
And that's all about forward momentum.
All kinetic, anxious momentum. The forms are elongated, streamlined, and they seem to hurtle away from the viewer. The lines of force are accentuated, conveying the speed and psychological forward thrust of travel. It's the visual equivalent of acceleration.
And finally, the third panel, Those Who Stay.
This is the opposite pole. The forms are heavier, more solidified, and anchored. The lines are vertical, weighted, conveying the melancholy, stability, and psychological stasis of those left behind.
So the train station elements are still there, but they feel like permanent, immovable structures rather than dynamic conduits of speed.
Precisely. By presenting these three facets simultaneously, he synthesizes the total human experience of modern travel.
The provenance of these works also speaks to their importance. They were initially acquired by Marinetti himself.
He understood their significance immediately. They were later acquired by Nelson Rockefeller and eventually donated to MoMA, securing their place as foundational works of 20th century art.
Following the trilogy, Boccioni shifted focus in 1912, moving into what's called the Dynamist series.
Right, focusing less on the emotional crowd and more on pure physical energy and motion. This starts with elasticita, or elasticity.
Elasticity is a brilliant example of applying plastic dynamism to a natural subject. It depicts the pure, unbridled energy of a horse.
An animal that symbolizes power and speed, but is also traditional.
And he captures it with this intense, almost blinding chromaticism.
He's using cubist structure, but applying futurist velocity. The series expanded to catalog motion scientifically, dynamism of a cyclist, dynamism of a footballer, and later, the more complex urban synthesis, plastic dynamism, horse plus houses from 1914.
So he was proving that his theory was universally applicable to the athlete, the machine, the whole urban landscape.
It shows the commitment of the theorist. However, between 1912 and 1914, he briefly revisited portraiture, though filtered through the futurist lens, with works like L'Antigrazioso, the anti-graceful.
And works like The Drinker.
Yes, highly charged figurative works. But a major conceptual shift occurs after 1914, and the sources suggest it's connected to the publication of his book, Pittura, Scultura Futuriste.
Tell us about the rift. Publishing a defining theory would usually solidify leadership, but in this case, it created friction.
It did. The sources indicate that Boccioni's intense theoretical commitment and, perhaps a tendency toward authoritarianism in defining the movement's strict rules led to a rift with some of his futurist comrades.
And so, as a response, or maybe driven by a new intellectual challenge, he abandoned the focus on pure dynamism and speed.
That's right. Instead, he sought a further decomposition of the subject, prioritizing color and volume over kinetic lines of force. He was essentially returning to a new kind of modern figurative painting.
And his late period shows this evolution.
Yes, works like Horizontal Volumes from 1915 and the magnificent portrait of Ferruccio Busoni from 1916 mark a full circle.
It's deeply fitting, and maybe a little melancholy, that his final major painting was of the same maestro who had recognized and validated his early futurist masterpiece, The City Rises.
It is. It demonstrates that even as he declared war on tradition, he still maintained deep personal and artistic connections to certain figures, including, of course, his mother, who appeared continually in his work right up until 1915.
As we touched on earlier, Boccioni knew that true plastic dynamism demanded moving beyond the flat canvas. His commitment to sculpture was, like everything with him, formalized with a revolutionary text.
Absolutely. The move to the third dimension was not a dabbling phase for him. It was a physical and intellectual commitment, launched with the publication of his Manifesto Tecnico della Scultura Futurista in April 1912.
And in it, he laid out these radical demands.
Oh, totally radical. Abolish the inherited nobility of marble and bronze and instead use modern, revolutionary materials like glass, cardboard, iron, wood, even electric lights. He wanted sculpture to integrate with the environment, not sit passively on a pedestal.
And this commitment resulted in the singular, most iconic piece of futurist art ever created. Forme uniche della continuità nello spazio.
Or unique forms of continuity in space. This work, completed in wax by the end of 1913, is the ultimate physical embodiment of his synthetic theory. Boccioni's goal was not just to capture the pose of a human figure walking.
No, he was aiming for something much bigger.
He aimed to depict the synthetic continuity of motion. He was specifically contrasting this with what he saw as the analytical discontinuity in Cubist sculpture and in the work of other avant-gardists like Marcel Duchamp.
So when we look at unique forms, we don't see a man stepping forward. We see the sheer force of the action.
That's it. The figure's limbs dissolve into these massive airfoil-like sweeps of material that convey the resistance of the air, the wind displacement, the resulting distortion of space. It's a visual sonic boom in bronze.
And the figure has almost no visible hands or face.
Right, which focuses all the attention on the movement itself and the relationship between the body and the space it occupies. It captures a duration, not an instant.
The irony, of course, is that during Boccioni's short life, this groundbreaking work only existed as a fragile plaster cast.
That's right. The famous bronze editions we see today weren't cast until 1931, years after his death. which just validates the enduring power of his initial vision.
And its status today is undeniable. It was chosen in 1998 for engraving on the back of the Italian 20-cent euro coin.
It's an extraordinary validation. A radical, anti-traditional, century-old avant-garde concept serving as the face of modern European currency, the ultimate absorption of the revolutionary idea into the establishment.
However, the story of Boccioni's sculptural output is not one of seamless success. It's marked by a truly heartbreaking tragedy regarding the fate of his experimental work.
It is. The account of what happened to his early sculptures following his death is one of the most painful footnotes in modern art history.
So what happened?
Following his death in 1916, his family temporarily entrusted his experimental sculptures to a fellow sculptor, Piero da Verona, for safekeeping, and this decision was fatal for his legacy. The source accounts reveal a terrible act of either negligence or malice. Da Verona's assistant, perhaps not understanding the value or simply instructed to clear space, placed these original non-bronze experimental pieces right into the local rubbish dump.
So a profound chunk of his three-dimensional vision, the physical explorations of his most intense theoretical period, was simply discarded as trash.
Just thrown away. And we have slightly conflicting accounts that deepen the tragedy. Marinetti, always prone to drama, offered a slightly different version.
Of course he did.
He claimed the works were deliberately ripped apart by the workmen to clear the room, actively blaming an envious Passeist's narrow-minded sculptor.
So regardless of whether it was malice or negligence, the result was the same.
Utter devastation. We only know much of his intensely experimental work from late 1912 and 1913 pieces like The Head plus House plus Light or Synthèse du Dynamisme humain through two-dimensional photographs. A deep intellectual phase of his career is known only through ghosts.
It truly is a lost legacy, limiting our full understanding of his evolution in sculpture.
It is. It's a miracle that any experimental pieces survived, though thankfully some, like Antigrazioso, the mother, did endure. This historical void has spurred modern efforts to reclaim the loss.
Right. I read about the historic collection in London.
Yes. In 2019, they organized an exhibition focused on meticulously reconstructing several of these destroyed sculptures using the surviving photographic evidence. It's a century-late attempt to physically see what Boccioni truly achieved in the third dimension.
Given the futurist obsession with aggression and war, Marinetti famously declared war the world's only hygiene. Boccioni's participation in World War I was, I suppose, inevitable.
It was the ultimate test of the Futurist creed, and when Italy entered the war in May 1915, he immediately volunteered.
He joined the Lombard Battalion volunteers, cyclists, and motorists.
Which was the perfect embodiment of the Futurist ideal. Speed, technology, and youth. They set off from Milan in early June 1915, heading for the Trentino front. Boccioni, the artist, was living his manifesto.
And he experienced action. He participated in the Battle of Dosso Cassina in October 1915. He was, for a time, fully immersed in the violent, kinetic reality he had celebrated in his art.
His service, however, was broken up. The volunteer battalion dissolved in December 1915, and he returned to civilian life briefly. But the following year, in May 1916, he was drafted into the regular Italian army.
And assigned to an artillery regiment near Verona.
Yes. And this transition from the cutting-edge volunteer motor unit symbolizing futurist speed to a traditional static artillery regiment is the geographical and ideological backdrop for the profoundly cruel irony of his death.
The irony is just inescapable.
Yeah.
And heartbreaking.
It is. Umberto Boccioni, the artistic poet of velocity, the man who immortalized the speeding automobile and the charging kinetic forces of the modern age, met his end in the most prosaic of ways.
Involving the oldest form of cavalry movement.
On August 16, 1916, at the age of 33, he was thrown from his horse during a mundane cavalry training exercise near Verona and was tragically trampled. He died the following day at the Verona Military Hospital.
33. Just 6 years after he signed the Manifesto of Futurist Painters. His career was so brief, so intense, and defined by a relentless pace of intellectual output that is staggering to consider.
And the brevity of his career in no way diminishes his profound influence. His radical approach shaped the entire next generation of modernists across Europe. For example, C.R.W. Nevinson, a young English artist, enthusiastically joined Futurism directly under Boccioni's influence.
He traveled to Italy to absorb the doctrine.
He did. And even more significantly, Boccioni's ideas directly inspired the British counterpart movement known as Vorticism, led by Wyndham Lewis.
Vorticism took the futurist concept of dynamism and fused it with the angular geometric elements of Cubism.
Right, effectively confirming Boccioni's vision as a pan-European intellectual revolution against the polite traditions of the 19th century.
And his foundational status is evident in his enduring presence in global art institutions today.
Absolutely. His works are proudly held by MoMA, the Guggenheim, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, recognizing his role as a critical bridge figure from Impressionism to true abstraction.
And that critical reputation continues to be affirmed through major institutional support. The Met, in 1988, organized a massive retrospective featuring 100 of his pieces.
A huge undertaking, which thoroughly cemented his historical importance. And in 2004, the Guggenheim held a focused exhibition centered around his later monumental painting materia. Even a century later, Boccioni's singular, short, explosive career continues to define the history of early modernism.
So if we synthesize Boccioni's achievement for you, the listener, we see an artist who was a voracious learner mastering Divisionism, absorbing Cubism, only to use those tools to create a truly revolutionary aesthetic.
He took the chaotic sensory assault of the machine age and codified it into a vibrant visual language focused entirely on motion, speed, and the dynamic modern experience.
And two details will forever stick with his legacy. First, the profound irony of his death.
The poet of pure velocity being fatally thrown and trampled by a horse during a simple training exercise.
And second, the senseless tragedy of the destroyed experimental sculptures. A profound loss of intellectual and artistic history, known only through traces, yet still informing the power of his ultimate masterpiece, unique forms of continuity in space. Boccioni's mission, the mission he articulated in Pittura e Scultura Futuriste, was synthesizing every moment, time, place, form, color tone into a single cohesive picture.
His art was designed to capture duration, the feeling of movement over time, not just a static instant.
And it raises a vital question about how we try to capture reality today. I mean, consider the radical difference between experiencing a work of art that captures a single frozen moment
Versus interacting with a piece like Unique Forms that attempts to visually represent motion through time itself. That idea of synthetic continuity is now central to our world.
So what contemporary artists or media, equipped with tools Boccioni could only dream of, from complex film editing and high-speed motion capture to virtual reality and immersive digital environments, are truly managing to capture that same total synthesized experience that Boccioni pioneered over a century ago?
It's a great question. Are we simply better at capturing snapshots, or are we truly living in Boccioni's kinetic, synthesized world?
That's something to mull over until our next deep dive.